Today on Locked On Red Wings, Max Bultman talked about trading up, trading down, and standing pat. Which do we think is the best option for Detroit?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Ann Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I am formerly a broadcast producer for 97 Won the Ticket, where Scotty is the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And on today's episode, guys, talk to you a little bit about Max Bultman recently wrote an article, I read it, he wrote it, about 3 draft day scenarios in which the Red Wings stay pat, trade up, trade down. Immediately caught my interest because that's something that we've asked pretty much every person we've had on here when doing a draft profile, and
Max
what they
included.
think, and Max included. So it was a really, really great article. You guys should go read it so that he can, remain employed like the rest of us. He deserves it. He writes really good stuff, and he's really he's just a really great writer, knows his stuff. Scotty, that's what we're going to talk about in segment 1, and maybe a little bit of 2. Also going to talk about Utah being down to 6 names before their new hockey team out there in Salt Lake. And spoiler alert, I'm not really hot on any of them. I don't know what your thoughts are, Scotty, but I'm sure we'll get to that. And then if we got time, segment 3, how do you feel about it Friday? But before we get to any of that, I got to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of being an NHL GM and managing your own hockey franchise? Well, now you can with Ultimate Hockey GM. It's completely free, and Locked On listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code LOCKEDONNHL in the game store. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today. Also want to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Scotty, we talked with Max, 2-3 weeks ago. He helped us do a profile on Beckett Seneca. And when we had Max on, we asked him, like you just said, right? We asked Max about the possibility of the Red Wings trading up or trading down. And the thing that he told us is that trading in the first round, specifically up, is rare and really hard to do. And that you're more than likely going to stay pat. And I think that's the first place that you and I are going to begin talking about. And that's one of the big points that obviously Max talked about in this article, that it more than likely the Red Wings are going to stand pat, and the player that he mocked to the Red Wings is the same guy that everyone is mocking to the Red Wings. He even joked about it in the article as well, that MBN, Michael Brandsig-Newgard, is people are getting a little bit tired of seeing his name, but the point being, the reason you're seeing everyone mock him to Detroit is because it just makes so much sense. And we talked about it with the mock draft, right? He's a 200-foot game, has a 200-foot game. He is physical. He's a hard forechecker. He's got a killer shot. And that standing pat for a player like that caliber just makes a lot of sense. And I feel even outside of MBN, right? Most years at 15, you're more than likely going to stay there.
Yeah, for sure. And we even have talked about it a lot with the people that we have had on the show breaking down individual prospects or whatever, is the fact that especially when it comes to the forward group, there is a lot of forwards that are all in a similar tier. They all have different skill sets and all, the people argue until they're blue in the face about who has the higher ceiling or the lower floor, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact of the matter is there's a lot of forwards that are all in that, say, 8 to 18 range, right? Like there's a lot of guys that are very interchangeable. We even talked about it earlier in the week when we did our Locked On host mock draft, right? And we talked about how, the top 2, maybe 3 are somewhat penciled or penned in. And then after that, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of interchangeable kind of, potential for switching in a lot of these mocks. So, yeah, I agree. I think that 15, just staying pat at 15 is easily the most likely scenario. I'm kind of in the boat where if they did move in either direction, I would be pretty surprised. I kind of fully expect them to to stand pat and just take a player at 15. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's not a negative connotation. That's the pick they got, and that's completely fine. So I at this point, I would be rather surprised if they did move in either direction, and that's not a bad thing. You can get a really solid player. Again, like even aside from what seems to be general consensus here about where the Wings would go at 15, there's like I said, there's an entire pool of pretty similar caliber players, at least on draft night. And so yeah, man, I have no problem staying at 15. I kind of expect them to, and we're going to get all, crazy and talk about the other potential scenarios here in a second. But I do think it's important to start off that conversation. I'm glad you started off with it with, hey, we kind of do fully expect them to just pick at 15.
Yeah, I mean, it just, outside of everyone's favorite MBN, right? It just makes so much sense, because one of the first things we talked about when we initially started talking about the draft is there are a lot of forwards that are likely going to go from 10 to 20, save like an insane run on forwards, pushing those top defenders back. And the difference between a lot of those guys from at least, scouts, and, a lot of our mock drafts are consistently wrong every year. There's always a curveball or two. There's not a big gap between any of those players. So barring a player that suddenly becomes available that you absolutely love and need, you kind of just stay at 15 and pick who, like we talked about, the best player available. And that obviously is where Max's mind is at, as well as the most likely situation. But the most likely situation isn't the most fun situation, right, Scotty? It's more fun to talk about trading up and trading down. And those are things that Max covered as well in his recent article. One of the things in his trading up scenario, he had the Red Wings swapping picks with the, I think the Philadelphia Flyers at 12, and
talked about a few teams, yeah.
Yeah. In his hypothetical draft, he had the Red Wings swapping with pick number 12 and taking Policygenius, because in this hypothetical situation, there was a run on defenders in the top 10, which pushed some of those higher caliber forwards back to the early teens, the 10s and the teens, in which the Red Wings still, though, and this is what makes trading up so difficult, even trading up 3 picks, the Red Wings had to give up quite a bit to get that. But is Policygenius worth it? And that's the big question. And when we're talking about trading up to begin with, like, that is the big question, is you're going to have to give up a haul to move up just 3 spots. In this hypothetical situation, Max Bultman, who's very smart, he covers the Red Wings for The Athletic all the time. Again, go read his stuff. He has the Red Wings having to give up 15, 47, so their second round pick, and Anton Johansson, the other Johansson, who still plays over in Sweden, who's a very good prospect in his own right, just to move up 3 whole spots. And that's a pretty steep price. And that's in the hypothetical situation that Policygenius somehow falls that far. So that's what makes, in my opinion, trading up so difficult to even foresee, is because so many things have to go right just to be in a situation like that. And that's something he mentions as well, obviously. And the big hang up there, Scotty, and I just said it again, not to, beat a dead horse here, but is moving up and giving up that much really worth it, when in the grand scheme, what separates these players isn't that big? Now, Ginla, yeah, he's a caliber above MBN, right? But you're also banking on the hypothetical that he falls that far. You're not trading up for any of these other forwards, right? Unless the team, the organization really has fallen in love with one of these guys. It's a lot to give up when there's not that big of a gap between the forwards that are taken, that are projected to at least be taken, not Ginla notwithstanding, projected to be taken between 12 and 15.
Yeah, this is entirely about how the board falls. We can talk about that after the break if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue this conversation and talk about trading down as well. So stay tuned to Locked on Red Wings. Hey, Locked On Red Wings fans, I want to take a moment to bring up one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your hockey franchise? Do you think you could run the Red Wings better than the current general manager, Steve Yzerman? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your game, play through the seasons, and lead it to glory. Hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or draft picks, navigate through free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As a Red Wings fan, you know there is no off season. GMs are constantly making moves at every point of the year to improve their team's chances, and that's why I think you're going to love this game. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. Play the game on the go as you want and when you want to. By the way, Lockdown Network listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app, or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate Hockey GM. Start your dynasty today. Segment 2, Lockdown Red Wings podcast. And so we were talking about trading up, right, Scotty? And you're getting ready to say something about entirely on how the board falls. And I think I know where you're going to go, but I'm going to let you go there first.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is kind of just a conversation of what do the Red Wings scouts and front office think of certain wingers, right? Like I think that really is where most of this conversation revolves around. There's a lot of wingers specifically, like we have already alluded to several times, that are all kind of in a similar tier there. So if there's a guy that they love that is still on the board at, say, 8 or 9 or 10, that they thought was going to be gone in the top 5, then they might pull the trigger on something like that. But that is really kind of the only scenario in which I personally think that they would consider, giving up, like you said, a decent amount of assets to move up in this draft. You also, like, it takes 2 to tango, baby, right? Like, it's really easy to just be like, oh, well, like, we really like this guy and he fell. It's like, okay, well, then I'm going to guess the team that's there when said prospect is on the board probably also likes this, made up scenario, that this imaginary player that has fallen into their lap that was supposed to go, whatever, top 3 or 5 and fell. So, like, it takes 2 to make a trade happen. I think that's something that a lot of people forget sometimes. And so you have to find a willing trade partner. When looking at the teams above, I think that is kind of an interesting conversation just around who would trade back. And again, some of that is just straight up going to have to do with how the draft board falls. But like Utah at 6, I have a hard time is trading back in year one of their franchise. I don't think anybody in the top 3 is trading back. Columbus, I have a hard time believing they're going to be super willing to trade back. They're trying to get as much top end talent as they can. Like, we can just go down the list and just go through like all of these teams. Calgary's always a unique one just because they're all, I don't know, just kind of a team that's been in limbo the last season and a half. The Devils are probably, like if they got an improvement in net, then they would consider something like that. But the Wings don't exactly have anything to offer them in that regard. But they're clearly talented and might consider it, I guess. But there's only a few, and like you mentioned earlier, the Flyers, in Bultman's article, he talked about Philly. Like, that's like there's only a few teams I think that are really on the table for, we would be super willing to trade back in this draft. Yep. Maybe Ottawa at 7, maybe, but that would be, you'd have to give up legitimate NHL talent. And I'm not sure the Wings want to trade legitimate NHL talent interdivision. That's never really a recipe for success. I don't know, man. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but it takes 2 to get a deal done. You can't just be like, oh yeah, just move up right now. Like, you have to find an appropriate partner. And I'm not sure that outside of, again, maybe the Devils, I guess maybe Buffalo, maybe Seattle, like any team in that 8 to 11 range, maybe, but or 8 to 12 if you want to throw Philly in there. But outside of that, I don't know. I think it might be a little bit harder than people think to move up, to your point.
Well, yeah, that's where I started. And to your credit, I think you said what I was trying to say a little bit more eloquently than I did. I was kind of rambling at the end of segment 1. No, you bring up a really good point, right? Like, and that's what, and Max said this when he was on, and he said it in his article, like, it's really hard to trade up because if somebody's going to trade back,
Who did we have on that said there were 0 first-round trades last year? Was that Tony?
It might have been Tony. But like if there's someone on the board that has fallen, that is so good that you're willing to trade up, why would the team that's sitting there not just take him themselves? Right. Like that's the situation that you find yourselves in. And like that's why trading up in this situation that Max gave made sense, because the board fell in a way where Tija Ginla, really, really good talent, fell to 12. And so, okay, now it's worth it because that player is better enough, better than the player you could get at 15 enough that it warrants a trade. But then again, why would a team that's sitting there then be like, oh yeah, I'll just trade back then? Like it just, That's why it's such a hard thing to see. And anyone else, like if Ginla's not there and the board falls the way we think, there's not really anybody realistically that is so much better than who you could get at 15 that it's worth the haul you'd have to give up to get that person. So that's the situation. And that's why I think, and we think, that trading up is hard. Now, trading back, I think, and I specifically love the scenario.
Man. You get a big old smile on your face when you talk about trading back, let me tell you.
And this is specifically because I screenshotted it and texted to Max, and it was with the yes gift because I love the trade back scenario he gave. So he has the Red Wings trading back to the Chicago Blackhawks at 18 for the same reason why trading up is hard, right? And it's kind of like putting it on the head, right? Like you're going to need a team like Chicago to really love somebody at 15 to be willing to trade up, but they also get something out of it, and we get something out of it by not just swapping picks, but giving them Justin Holl in the process. And a lot of Red Wings fans are going to be sitting there listening like, why would the Blackhawks want Justin Holl? Well, Max points out, and it's a very good point, they don't have enough NHL caliber right shot D-men on their roster. They're also a team that's going to be struggling to hit the cap floor because they're in the depths of the rebuild. And to do so, you only move back 3 picks. And like I just said, the Red Wings, the difference between the forwards in this 10 to 20 group, and the Red Wings could take D, who freaking knows? But we're working on the assumption they're likely going to take one of the many forwards that are projected to be available. The difference isn't that much. So if you can move back a couple spaces, shed some borderline dead cap that the Red Wings have, and still get a guy that is on your board that projects to be a very good NHL forward at 18, that is a win-win for both teams. The Blackhawks move up, they get to the cap floor, they have an NHL caliber defense for now, and they get a slightly better player. Like, it's a win-win for both teams in my eyes. And that's why when I read this part, I was like, let's freaking go. That's why I love personally the trade back option. Obviously, standing pat at 15 is still the smartest option you could go. But the idea of getting rid of a contract that's just not panning out for the Red Wings, but yet still getting a quality prospect in return at 18, like I'm like, let's go, let's do it.
yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Like Hull doesn't have trade value. That would be again, like the Wings would have to give up something like legitimate assets to make that trade happen. But I mean, I never really have, unless you have a top, 5 pick. I'm never really against at least the conversation of trading back. I don't have an issue with that whatsoever. I do think that the Wings, similar to the conversation we just have, if the guy that they really like is on the board at 15, then don't get too cute with him, man. Like just take your guy and go home. You don't have to, walk the tightrope and play the game and be like, oh, well, can we trade back 2 picks and have him still be there and whatnot? Like let's just, take our win and go home if that's the case. But if nobody they love is on the board at 15, then I think you should always entertain trading back to some extent, right? I think you always should. So, it'll be interesting, and that's another one again that is just very reliant on how the board kind of falls.
Yeah, and I would actually personally. There's going to be a rare example where I push back on you a little bit because normally we're in sync. I do think Justin Holl has value to the right kind of teams. I mean, how many rebuilding teams? he did not fit the Red Wings scheme, but he is a guy who played big minutes with Toronto. I know Toronto's defense has been a thing of the past, but he played 80 games. And to a rebuilding team, not only can he be a veteran presence that plays big minutes while your team is supposed to be bad, but he also, with that contract for 2 more years, can help you get to the cap floor, because they need $10 million. They need to spend $10 million just to get to the floor of the cap. And I think that for a team like the Chicago Blackhawks is very appealing. I think that's what his trade value is. Now, I could be completely off base with that. I know you disagree with me, but that's why when I looked at that, I was like, that makes sense to me, because that's a Chicago Blackhawks team that could use a contract like holes, like the Red Wings used to be, right? Like, how many trades did the Red Wings do when they were going through a rebuild that were like certified cap dump trades? Like just getting a veteran who was on a bloated contract and getting picks in return. And in this situation, they get to move up 3 spots and get a guy that they think is better. So I like that idea a lot. I think if I were to rank,
it's a bad move. And I'm not, yes, like you're right. That is why they would take him, because of the cap. Yeah. Like the Wings did that a lot when they were terrible.
And it gives Justin Holl a chance to play hockey, which he didn't get in Detroit.
Which like the front office doesn't care about. But like, yeah, yes, you're right. Like that is the value that, the value, quote unquote, that he has in a trade. But like you're giving up a player and moving back in the draft like that. Like clearly he doesn't have trade value. You're
right.
What you're giving up an NHL player and moving back in the draft. That is like, yes, like that. Clearly he does not have trade value. But again, like the Coyotes did it all the time. The Wings did it all the time when they were terrible. Like, yeah, that's what bad teams with cap space do. They take on cap to get better assets. And so that, yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. I'm just saying Justin Holl in a vacuum has no trade value, and that mock trade is notch on my claim. Like, yes, like you're giving up a player and moving back. Like, yes.
Awesome. I think in my final rankings, we're both in agreement, staying pat's the most likely and most reasonable. But I do like the prospect of trading back. Trading up just seems like it's going to be so hard to accomplish, and so many things have to go right. And so many of the players that are projected to be available aren't that much better to make it worth it, in my opinion. But yeah, it was a great article, a great little brain exercise from Max, and for us then by extension. Again, I reiterate, go read Max's article in The Athletic. Go read that article.
Very good read. A lot of fun scenarios in there that we obviously didn't talk about.
Well, and he also is so much more eloquently written than I personally am spoken. Scotty, you're fine. You do a great job writing and spoken, but he lays it out so much better than I do.
He's really good at his job. Yeah.
Yeah. He's really, really good at his job. So yeah, go read that. We're going to head to another break. When we return, we're going to talk about the Utah being down to 6 team names. So stay tuned to segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, the Utah Hockey Club is down to the final 6 team names. And spoiler alert, I'm not a huge fan of any of them. Utah Blizzard, Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, Utah Outlaws, Utah Venom, and Utah Yeti. Do any of these sound good to you?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. Okay. My favorite one is the Utah Hockey Club. Just from a pure, like, that'd be kind of awesome. I I have a sweatshirt that says Washington football team on it. Like I love that kind of stuff. I think it's I don't know, maybe it's just like a humorous thing that it is actually a good team name, but I am kind of down for that. I mean, as far as like the actual team names, I think it's pretty underwhelming and pretty just like stereotypical and not surprising whatsoever. I think Utah Yeti isn't terrible. I don't think, just because you have a little bit, it's not alliteration, but it kind of is like pretend alliteration. Like it kind of sounds the same.
The
Utah
same
Yeti. I don't know.
sound. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So like you have that. I don't mind the mammoth, I guess, in you know, I don't think that one's terrible, but yeah, man, I don't know. Like I genuinely, if I was voting, like if I really cared about this and voted for the team name, legitimately, I think I'd vote for Utah Hockey Club.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. All of them to me just sound like EA Sports NHL create a team names, and like
Yeah,
you
it's
get
like
those
when you
generic,
go for an expansion franchise and they
right,
have like the pre-made teams, like that
and the
is
pre-made
literally
logo,
what they are. Yeah.
and I just none of them really speak to me. But to be fair, I didn't really like the Golden Knights, and I didn't really like the Kraken either when they
Really, I
first
love
got
the
revealed.
Kraken.
Well, I don't know. There's something about like mythical creatures that just seems so cheesy to me as like a team name, if I'm being completely honest. But like, oh, as time's gone on,
Of all people.
I've just stopped caring. And so like stopped caring about what team is named. And it's just like I don't think about it anymore. So like I know I know it's gonna be the Yeti. Like, let's be honest. I know it's gonna be the Yeti.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna hate it at first. And then their jerseys are gonna come out and they're gonna be probably pretty sick. And then I'll be like, all right, I'll warm up to it. And then after a few years, I'll be like, I don't really care anymore.
So
But I
my
just wish
only thing, and this is like not my brainchild. This is something that was thrown around on Twitter a lot, X, whatever it's called. Um, the Utah Jazz released their new jerseys,
oh
and they're
yeah, I
bringing
saw
back
those.
the purple mountain jerseys, and everybody was like, "Yo, get some more purple in the NHL," and I could not agree more. I think whatever direction they go here, utilize some purple. Like that is at the roots of their basketball team. I think it would be cool to kind of to throw. It's just a very underutilized color in the scheme of the NHL landscape, and I think that they could do a lot of really cool stuff with it. So that's like my one request is like your team name's going to be mid. That's great. I don't care. Make the jerseys cool. Throw some purple on it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the LA Kings back when they had the royal purple, those
Oh,
uniforms
and the
were sick.
crowns. Yeah,
Well, and
man.
apparently they're redesigning their uniforms and they're bringing back the old logo. Hopefully, they bring back the old color scheme too, because
Yeah.
silver, black, and white is not it.
Yeah, it's just
I
plain.
completely agree, but it looks like they're gonna have like a light blue in their logo because their Utah Hockey Club logos leaked and they're all like light blue and dark blue.
Yeah.
Which the
I'd imagine there's
Kraken
going to be
are
a lot of
also.
white on the threads as well.
Yeah. But when it comes to these 6 team names, man, I guess this is kind of a how do you feel about it, actually, isn't it? How do you feel about these team names?
Right.
I don't really like any of them, but I'm sure I'll get used to it eventually. They just all feel like creative team names.
Yeah.
Like I wish they would have gone with something. And that's the thing too. Like I don't know anything about Utah. I don't know anything about Salt Lake City really, besides the fact that it's the Salt Lake. So I can't really claim to be like pick something that really represents the state or the city, but that's where I like that being a trend.
I get that aspect of like wanting. Again, I agree with you. I think these are all really bland and generic names. I don't disagree with that take at all. Really, again, my biggest stance is just like throw some purple in there, man. That's really what I care about at this point.
And the biggest thing for me too is like I'm critical of these names, but I've been thinking for the life of me, like what could you name them? And I don't think of anything better either. So
Utah Hockey Club, let's run it.
Whatever it is, we'll get used to and we'll get over it. So that's how it be. Anyways, buddy, do you have any final thoughts?
I don't think so, man. We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode on we might take Monday off because of Father's Day, but I'll confirm for sure for you guys on social media. So stay tuned for that. At the very least, we'll be back Tuesday. Same time, same place, your team every day.
Every day.